Unbroken by Laura Hildenbrand surprised me. I've never really been into reading biographies because I think concentrating on my own life is hard work enough. And I had no expectations going in and went in completely blind. But wow, it was genuinely excellent. It was a really, really well written biography. It had cinematic detail. Everything was plotted out very well. And it stars a pilot in World War II's horrifying experiences and his perseverance onward. Okay, let's start with a brief summary of Unbroken. So we start with our protagonist, in this case, Louis Zamperini, who is born in the year 1917. He's one of those super rebellious and troublemaking kids, as well as a thief. He stole his neighbor's stuff, he pranks people for fun, and he just causes trouble everywhere. His family tries to calm him down and make him more of a obedient kid, but it just isn't working. So his brother Pete decides to help him mature by making him a runner. So he decides to train hard and become an excellent runner. In fact, he beats several records and goes on to the Olympics and even shakes hands with Hitler because Germany was hosting it that year. Louis is pretty successful throughout his teenage life, but then World War II starts. Louis decides to become a soldier because he wants to stop Germany and, by extension, Japan. He trains to become a pilot in the Air Force. He eventually becomes a bombardier, aka someone who just sits in a bomb ship and decides to bomb places, like usually islands in the South Pacific because of Japan's control over that general area. He eventually crashes on a rescue mission, ironically, and lands in the ocean, waiting to be rescued with 3 other people. The rest of his crew is already drowned. He drifts for 47 days and 2,000 miles west from where he crashed near Hawaii into Japan-controlled lands, and is eventually spotted by Japanese soldiers. He's captured, he's interviewed, and then he's sent to 3 separate detainment camps over the course of the next few years and becomes a prisoner of war. Each of them are crueler than the last. Suffering is everywhere. Unbroken tells the story of his life after his crash, after his prisoner of war experiences, and how he manages to persevere through and recover. Now onto the review. So for Unbroken, I'm not going to do the typical review style because that works much better for a fantasy novel or fictional. At least this is a real person, a real life, and I can't just rate it on its character development. So instead, I'm going to rate it more or less on its narrative. So I think it's excellent. Louis' story does sound like historical fiction because of how dramatic and amazing it is. It sounds like something you watch in a movie, and I think there actually is a film based off this. The story is told very thoroughly, very realistically, with tons of detail. Like, it was very flushed out. It felt real to read. Unfortunately, his suffering was also told in extreme amounts of detail, which was slightly uncomfortable, but there it is. The world building of real life was done excellently too. There was a lot of details and context about World War II itself, about the South Pacific, about the Hawaiian Islands, and about how Japan is doing. I particularly really liked the multiple different perspectives of different characters and how the book occasionally changes its protagonist slightly by moving around and seeing other soldier stories too, and how they eventually relate back to Louis. Louis himself also has a lot of character and personality because we can see his defiance, his little troublemaking spirit persevere even throughout the war, and the hilarious jokes and pranks he does against the Japanese camps that he was imprisoned in as a prisoner of war, his thievery, his perseverance, his relentless optimism, and the fact that, funnily enough, he remains unbroken throughout each of the camps, even though all of them have very, very horrible people try to make him the way he is now. I'm not going to spoil too much, but I'm just going to say that the narrative is excellent and it's written very, very well. Now onto the written quality of Unbroken. It's pretty great overall. The punctuation, grammar, etc., the conventions of writing are all flawless. And the one thing I really liked about it was the fact that it did have great comedic timing. There was a lot of jokes in the book, even though it was about a horrific war with tons of suffering in it. There were funny moments. Unfortunately, or fortunately, kind of, the suffering timing was also great because the details of the extreme pain that Louis goes through as his prisoner of war and the different people he encounters throughout were timed pretty darn well too, and they all felt like fleshed out characters. So overall, the written quality is great. In the end, Unbroken is just a fantastic biography. It has fleshed out characters, amazing details and context in the world building, and just overall, every character has something to learn from. All of them are pretty sympathetic towards, and generally just a very, very well-written narrative overall.